So welcome everyone. That was TikTok by Kesha. We hope that hyped you up for today's session because the TikTok that we know today is the social media app. Kesha pretty much invented it back in the day with this song. So we hope you're ready to rock the social media world beyond TikTok and through other social media apps with your climate activism in this session. But jokes aside, my name's Ava. I'm with the capacity building of the Youth4Capacity, and I'd like to warmly welcome you all to the third session of the Youth4Capacity Becoming series titled Becoming Climate Content Creators, which has been led by the wonderful and talented Qiyun, science communicator and founder of the Weird and Wild. And we also have a wonderful guest joining today as well, Rachel Wang. So we hope the two of you can guide us essentially into how we can harness the power of today's social media platforms to create impactful content and to tell our stories. And the premise of this Becoming series essentially came about because youth are a lot of things beyond climate content creators. And it was essentially to showcase the different facets and skills that you can take within being change makers, from negotiators, entrepreneurs, activists, and so on. So we also have more sessions under this series planned for the next of the year. The next one happening in September. If you're interested in becoming a climate educator, feel free to join. But also through the Youth4Capacity program here at the UNFCCC, we offer various other opportunities for you to build your own capacity to act on climate change. The first one being, or one that actually launched really recently, the Climate Catalyst Mentorship Program. Next slide, please. There we go. Thank you. Which is an initiative of our team, but also UNDP's Youth4Climate initiative. So if you're keen on building further your technical capacities and soft skills to drive your impactful climate solutions and action, this program is for you. It will actually run over the course of 8 weeks. Next slide, please. With the first session starting on August 21st, and it will feature different interactive workshops and boot camps, so you'll be able to learn how to tell your story, unlock your leadership skills, scale your solution, master policy development, learn how to raise funds, and so on. And it actually has a peer learning and networking thematic channels where you'll be able to join live discussions with other like-minded peers. So make sure that you scan the QR code to join the program, as well as to check out the Youth4Capacity's work and other activities if you're keen on building your capacities on different areas to act on climate change. And now with that, kind of setting that context and providing that information, I'm excited to hand things over to someone that has mastered the art of climate communication and storytelling. And hopefully the two speakers today will be able to tell us how we can become climate content creators. So over to you, Qiyun.
Thanks, Eva, and thank you so much for having us here. We're both based in Singapore. Rachel, I don't know if you're based in Singapore, but very nice to meet everybody. My name is Qiyun. I am an environmentalist, a storyteller, and a climate activist based in Singapore. And I'm also just going to talk you through what does it mean to be a climate content creator. And I hope that you see my screen, and this gives you a brief introduction on the kind of work that I do. So a little bit about myself. I started this journey about being an environmentalist when I was 9 years old. And I remember this very clearly because this was the year that Steve Irwin also unfortunately passed away. And I remember that back then we had to write these journals to improve on our handwriting back in school. And I dedicated 3 whole pages, especially when I would only write 1 or 2 lines a page. And that told my parents that Steve Irwin was someone that really inspired me, and eventually inspired me to explore a career with the natural world in some way. So at 21, halfway through my university, I ultimately joined the Bachelor's of Environmental Studies at a university based in Singapore. And halfway through my 3rd year, I realized that so many of my friends were doing all these very exciting things in the climate and environment space, but that kind of storytelling is not really quite captured in the mainstream media. And hence, I wanted to start an account because I felt like I needed to find some other way to tell the world about what my friend was doing. And I also noticed that sometimes when it comes to climate work, it can be full of jargon or very technical. And I realized if I, as an environmentalist, struggled to understand what was going on, what more anybody else was keen but may not have the right language or understanding to really get a grasp of climate change. So, a little bit about my work is that I started the Weird and Wild as a very visual Instagram account to talk about this. And I have a guest speaker with me who is Rachel, and she will also share her journey on social media and the various other creative outlets that she does. So for myself, running this Instagram account for the past 6 years has been a huge journey in and of itself because for me, Instagram is a very visual platform, and I'm here to also show you the kinds of ways that I use visuals to create climate content and to take climate action, and also give you some tips and tools that I use that are mostly free to show you that anybody really can just pick this up and learn it by yourself. So when the Weird and Wild started, I just enjoyed illustrations. I was never trained in that. And I got my first secondhand iPad at that time with a pencil. So I didn't need any fancy thing to translate my drawings into something that's digital. And it's brought me to very interesting places around the world. This was me just last year at the National Geographic office in Washington, D.C., talking about my climate storytelling work. And that was such a huge moment for me because I realized that being a storyteller in the climate space is so extremely niche, and there are organizations out there who value this work. And if you have grown up watching Nat Geo or reading Nat Geo, and even things like Animal Planet and various things, you'll realize that the support for the science and the arts is limited, but at the same time, it's also such an interesting space to play in. So I'm going to share a few things on how I use visual storytelling. And one way is to change perceptions. So sometime a few years ago in Singapore, there was a very viral TikTok video where this boy got his bag stolen by a wild monkey, this macaque right here, who are considered pests along Singapore's streets where they'll line up. And that's because people feed them very often and they're seen as aggressive, when actually these are just monkeys who are trying to find food for themselves. Uh, and when that happened, I realized that even myself, as someone who cares about animals, wouldn't know what to do when I come face to face with a monkey in my path. If it has stolen something from me, I really have no idea what I'm going to do to get it back. So I created this infographic with my local primatologist, really as a way to tell people how they should react, especially when they see a monkey along their streets. And we were very deliberate to use colors like pastel yellow and to make the monkeys look as cute as possible because we want to show people that when a monkey bares its teeth or when they're smiling at you, it's not a sign of aggression, but it could be out of fear, and to debunk any myths that people might have. The next thing is that visuals can really do a lot to nudge behavior. And this was, triggered by this incident where along the intertidal shores in Singapore over COVID, we saw a lot of people, go out because there was very much nothing to do, but they started to pick things off our shores, such as sea stars, and all sorts of other creatures, which is not great for our marine ecosystem. And the Singapore authorities then put up these signs to tell people what not to do or what to do. So in this case, we noticed that people often tend to miss these posters because you just don't see them or you don't really notice that very much, especially if it's all text. And we proposed to the minister about finding new artistic ways to get this message out there in a way that perhaps would bring empathy to the animals that they were seeing on these shores. So if you can see, this is a drawing that I made of a pink warty sea cucumber with the same messages as you saw in the previous poster, because we wanted people to notice exactly what they should not be leaving off the shores, and also to sort of give them a little bit of an anthropomorphic angle where, now it's almost as though these creatures are saying, please don't pick us up, don't bring us home. And we hope that the artistic feature would stop them in their tracks, especially as they're going to the beach, and for them to read these messages. And I see visual storytelling as something that people can also use for complex topics. I don't know how many of you are receiving your information at the moment. Feel free to drop it in the chat box, or also if you have any questions around this, feel free to share it with us. But for me, I always read the newspapers, and sometimes certain topics or certain concepts are just very difficult to understand. And if you're explaining it in 100 words, I might even miss it altogether because for me, I learn things very visually and I really like it when things are fleshed out. So some things that I've explored is how about using visuals to talk about these concepts that would have otherwise taken maybe another 1,000 words to explain. So something that I created with a meteorologist a few months ago was to talk about why it was so hot for us living in the tropics, especially in Singapore. I'm not sure if most of you, where are you from? But in Singapore, we don't really have the four seasons. We don't have summer, spring, winter, or autumn. For us, it's hot all year round, which makes the seasons a little bit difficult for us to tell. But as I was talking to a friend over lunch, I learned very quickly from him that we have our own version of the seasons, which only changes in the amount of rainfall and how hot or dry the environment is. And that was very difficult to explain because when he showed me a book or when he was explaining it to me, that it was so full of jargon that I couldn't quite visualize how the winds were moving, the pressures that affected the weather that we faced every day. So I created almost like a cheat sheet for people to understand in different parts of the months. Singapore's weather actually goes through a bunch of different weather changes. These are characteristics of our northeast monsoon, inter-monsoon seasons, and now that we're in August, we're actually experiencing the southwest monsoon. And this could be very subtle things like feeling heavy rains in the morning, which you will not otherwise feel in any other time of the month. So by using these visuals, I hope to at least bring some excitement to an otherwise rather technical topic to explain. And this infographic, if you see my Instagram, I also take time to explain how rain clouds are formed, how the pressure system works, and also things like El Nino or La Nina that we faced in this year. So I see visuals as a very great opportunity for us to talk about these complexities, especially when we go into jargon like net zero targets, loss and damage. All those things have so much context that perhaps visuals allow us to break it down so that it's not so intimidating for someone to pick it up. And I know I have about 5 more minutes for my section before I pass my time to Rachel. But the one last thing that I want to cover is how social media for your content creation can be your choice of medium, because creating climate content comes in so many forms. You might be a writer, you might write for newspapers or magazines, you might create installations. So physical mediums are fantastic and are really great, but social media has made it a very easy platform for anybody and everybody to start creating content. For me, a few things that I've explored are things like web storytelling. A few friends and I are working on this project called Climate Commons, where we are trying to find ways to create interactive visual stories online such that people can interact with terms, terminologies, and exciting visuals so that you learn about a topic in a very interactive way. This is still a work in progress and it's a huge effort. So we're still in the process of seeing how we can make this work. But the other thing that a few friends and I were also doing is that we created a podcast to talk about climate issues and make it more accessible, casual, and fun for a general audience. This podcast is called Climate Cheesecake because we felt that cheesecake is something that is so can be so difficult to eat. You can't eat everything in one go and you need it bite-sized. And it's run by my friends who are ornithologists who study birds, marine biologists or reptile scientists. And I felt that having this diversity allowed us to cover a range of topics from so many angles and they have so many fun stories from the field to share. So if creating content via audio is something that you prefer, podcasts or vodcasts where there are videos is so super hot now, but it takes some time for you to figure out where your audience is and what you want to create. And I would share that we have done this for 2 seasons, and I still think that we haven't got the right, our right cadence and also the kind of content that we want to share. So even just getting started, we would likely take another 2 more seasons for us to find our voice. And I think that's very normal when you're doing content creation. The last thing is also if you are on LinkedIn, for many people if you're young professionals in this space, LinkedIn is now a very new space for content creators to thrive in, especially if you're creating very scientific, very technical content about the space that you work in, or even if you're a student, it's a great place for you to start creating content on things that you're passionate about. Because when you brand yourself in that way, it's a great opportunity for you to link up with other people who could share resources, share their expertise, and network and make new friends. So it's growing to become a whole new content platform in itself. And I would highly recommend for you to get a leg up and get started on LinkedIn. And in this space, writing concisely is absolutely key. And you can see that in these 3 different platforms, it requires different skill sets, but it's also very fun where if you're creating content, you're not stuck to one medium, but you can explore so many mediums. I know Eva played the song TikTok just now, and I don't dabble on TikTok because filming videos or talking in front of camera, especially recorded, is really a difficult thing for me, and I'm trying to create more often. But I find that I am just taking my time to explore that medium for myself. But some people are just very natural at it, so it really depends on what you're most comfortable with. So I also want to very quickly share the tools that I use on social media that will allow you to get started. So for anybody out there who wants to experiment with visuals, I highly recommend that you get some sort of tablet or an iPad or even a secondhand one, which was what I started with, because that provided a very easy way for me to get started without having to invest in any heavy equipment. So I used the earliest generation of iPad, which came with a very old Apple Pencil, but that was enough for me. And you don't need very fancy software as well. So I didn't know how to use things like Adobe Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator. So a lot of things where I required to crop out people or crop out objects. I use Microsoft PowerPoint to do things like remove background or even format square Instagram posts. But now everyone's using Canva. So Canva is also another great free tool that you can use. But this was what I started with. I also used Adobe Sketch at that time to allow me to convert my drawings into files that could be uploaded onto Instagram. So that's also a free tool that you can use. But I eventually realized that Adobe Sketch was not enough for me and went on to use Procreate, which required me to pay $15 for a lifetime membership. But it's also opened up my world to everything that I can create, from 2D art to things that I can print for exhibitions and also 3D models. So you can take your time, but it's always good to just start with the bare minimum and work your way up. For videos, now that I'm experimenting, I also don't know things like After Effects or other fancy editing software, but I use CapCut, Instagram to edit my reels, or Splice. And these are great free software for anybody to pick up because it's extremely user friendly. And you can just film with your phone. So you really can just be talking as you're walking on the way home or grabbing food to share more about the sustainability things that might be on your mind at that point in time. So when I think about creating climate content, I feel that there are these 3 principles that I follow, which is number one, it should be fun for yourself, it should be engaging, and it should be original. So something that we tend to get very caught up with is trends, like video trends. I feel that sometimes the best pieces of content do well because it's unique to you, and finding a sweet spot for yourself to continuously create that content takes a while, and even I myself to this day am finding that out. The second thing about climate change is that it must be rooted in science, and that requires a deep understanding of what are we really dealing with, what are we communicating, and what is the science behind it. Because I remember going to a panel, and a friend who works in climate journalism said that the thing about climate change is people often portray it as an opinion when actually it's a fact. So it's very important to base a lot of our work in science. And lastly, that creating climate content comes with important responsibilities, because these are things that would change so many people's lives. If we manage to convince someone to do something, it requires us to be responsible about what we're posting, how we're saying it, and also the kind of nuances behind saying something like, what does biodegradable mean? And what does it mean to end our ties with fossil fuels? So for me, climate content is just such a niche and exciting space. And I hope that I've covered as much as I can to tell you more about the work that I do. And social media is a great place for you to show others about what you care about. And I hope that with my work, when I show people what I care about, it helps more people care about them too. So yeah, that's the end of my spiel. I'm going to pass my time now to my friend Rachel to share her side of the story.
Hi, no, that was great. Thanks, Qiyun, for sharing. I'm very excited to be here also. Um, so by way of introduction, my name is Rachel, and yeah, I write. I'm based in Singapore and Vancouver now. I'm kind of between places for study. I write and I'm on Instagram also. So I guess starting off with what I talk about, I do cover a lot of agriculture and food systems related things from a social and environmental lens. So things like agrobiodiversity, how agriculture and land use change are interlinked, as well as what cultural contexts come into play. Things like consumption patterns, what we eat, how we eat, how the choices that we make when it comes to food makes a difference to the environment. And I think in recent years, it has started expanding into like more social angles also, things like smallholder farmers, smallholder livelihoods, issues like hunger and how we can kind of feed the world without destroying it, right? So my presentation is going to be a bit more focused on the hows and like the actual tools and I guess techniques or like the behind the scenes of what I'm doing. And yes, but before we get into that, I chose food, I guess, as my area and topic that I advocate for because of two reasons mainly. Number one, I think it's a great entry point. I think food is a universal experience, regardless of where you're dialing in from today. Food is something that everyone kind of has an experience with, and that makes it a great thing to start. When we're talking about environmentalism, because the question that we always get often is like, why should I care, right? How does it affect me? And I think the thing about food specifically that's so interesting to me is that, oh, sorry, is my screen shared? Yes. Oh, okay. Great. I'll just go on. So I guess the thing to me that's so interesting about food is that it's both a cause and a consequence of like the climate crisis. And what I mean by that is that something like 70% of the world's grassland and 27% and rising of tropical forests are being cleared for agriculture. And that's obviously where a lot of emissions are coming from. And at the same time, the food industry is responsible for something like a quarter of like emissions globally. So in that sense, food is not only a victim, which is what we kind of hear very often, right? That like, oh, because of drought, because of all these issues, agriculture is being affected and our food supplies are going to be disrupted. But what's equally important to kind of share awareness about is that food is in large part also a cause of these problems. And that also makes it a very big lever for like change when we're looking at trying to mitigate some of these climate impacts. And it's also a great entry point for how visible it is. Everyone eats, and I guess eating is a very social activity, right? So you're always eating in relation with other people. And in that context, the choices that you make can also influence other people's behavior. And lastly, because it's easy to link to other topics. And food is also a great lever. Like I said, everyone eats. That gives you scale on some capacity where someone cannot say, I don't feel like I am able to make a contribution in this space. I don't feel like I can actually make a difference because in your everyday choices, you kind of at every juncture are presented an opportunity to change what you eat and thereby make kind of like that little bit of impact. And everyone eats every day, which kind of gives you like consistent and long-term impact. And all this is important because the subject matter, I guess, for me, informs my approach when it comes to advocacy. So the fact that it's a great entry point also means that in itself, as an entry point, it is very simple. And I guess Qiyun's work centers a lot around like taking complicated topics and breaking them out. Things like breaking them down. Things like how she covers like the IPCC reports and tries to simplify them so that they're easy to understand for people. For me, I feel like people often don't think enough about food. I don't know if you would be able to recall what you ate today or be able to tell me kind of where the ingredients in your plate came from. So in that sense, I guess I see some of my work as trying to complicate things, right? I'm trying to get people to think a bit more about the things that they're eating and trying to enrich that conversation around food. Where is it from? Who is it? Who is growing it? And what kind of like intended or unintended consequences does it have for the global food system and the environment at large? And I guess it's a great lever, which means that when I do calls to actions, I tend to focus on visible behavior, behavioral changes. Whereas I know that there are activists and advocates in the space who kind of um, encourage more people to step up, people to write into their politicians, people to sign petitions. And all these are definitely important and I'll even say critical to the climate movement. But for me, specifically to the space that I'm in and the changes I'm trying to advocate for, that has been a lot more focused on like visible behaviors. And yeah, I guess for me, I'm also very focused on sustaining interest because food in itself is a huge topic and it serves people who are interested in this topic specifically well if they are constantly interested in what more I can find out about the food, rather than kind of going off specific topics where it's like, okay, um, here's some info about energy maybe, and here's some info about like um, biodiversity. Yeah, so I tend to focus on one topic and really like drill down. And on the note of kind of like approach informing the choice of medium, subject matter informs your approach and approach informs your choice of medium, right? I chose Instagram and long form articles as kind of like my choice of weapon because I guess for Instagram, what I do is like short videos and short form text. So short videos because those are kind of the way that I draw in new audience. That's more of like an entertainment tool. It's meant to engage and it's not meant to be very information heavy. Whereas I also do have like short form text. These are things like explainers that are meant to be easily shareable as compared to like long form articles. So these are kind of crafted to synthesize and summarize info. As for like the articles, so I do run like a page on WordPress, and I'll go more into that later, like the platforms that I use. But I do deep dives, and there's this explicit focus on providing Southeast Asian food systems discourse and that is supposed to be at a level that kind of matches what exists for Western food. And the reason why is that the reason Tong, which is the page, even came about was because when I was getting very much into food systems and reading about like the environmental impacts of agriculture, one of the things that I realized was that almost everything that I read was based around like US farms. Sometimes you get like European policies being analyzed and things like that. But no one was talking about Asia. Specifically, no one was talking about Southeast Asia, which is where I grew up. And I just felt like there was so much potential for discourse that was more culturally relevant, things that were contextualized and things that actually worked for us. Because a lot of the things that I was reading weren't necessarily immediately applicable to me. Like if you're talking about things like avocados and how they're becoming kind of like the new blood diamonds, right? If anyone's been following that discourse, those weren't things that I immediately felt like I had the ability to control or exercise some form of influence over. Whereas things like fishing maybe, yeah. So a lot of the Southeast Asian states engage in like a lot of fishing. And those kind of were more immediate things that I felt like by changing consumer behavior, we had a more direct influence over. And yet those were not being covered by kind of the Western media that I was exposed to. And so for that reason, this kind of like deep dive analytical platform came up. In short form text, I guess the tools that I use, Canva Pro works wonders. generally I don't have the bandwidth to turn things into graphics. It's similar to how Qiyun talked about how she doesn't really do as many videos right now because that's difficult for her. For me, doing visuals like what she does takes up a lot of bandwidth for me. So I guess one of the things that I try to do is to approach everything with a best effort basis kind of attitude. And this short form text kind of function as Q&As, like question and answers about things within the food system. I also do short videos. They're filmed on Smart Camera, which is an app that's free for iPhone, and I subtitle them on Instagram directly. There are cooking videos with voiceovers, book summaries, and I talk about specific topics. And recently, what I've been trying to do is to lower the required effort. So I'm trying to get comfortable just speaking in front of the camera with minimal editing, etc. Long form articles, I use WordPress.org. It's about $100+ a year for hosting. And each article that I put out is about 2,005 to 3,000 words. There isn't a regular posting schedule or subscribe mechanism, which is something that I'm working on now. But I guess one of the things that's very exciting for me is that I'm in the process of bringing on more writers that are based in Southeast Asia. And that's kind of to expand the range of perspectives that's presented there, right? So I guess a low plug, open call to all of you who are based in Southeast Asia. If you're interested in food systems and climate communications, don't mind writing long form pieces, please reach out via Instagram. Yeah, and I guess on the note of like constantly learning, sources of info that I use and I learn best from are like talks, panels, having conversations with people. I've listed some of my favorite books as well as research papers. And I thought this was important to share because when I was starting out, I did feel a bit of, I guess, insecurity or imposter syndrome because I felt like, what do I bring to the table if I'm not trained in environmental science or if I'm not like a farmer by trade? Like, what is it that I'm actually trying to tell people? And so, kind of having these platforms and being able to constantly learn from these different sources has helped me kind of increase my own understanding and knowledge. Yeah, and I guess just to end off, clarity of purpose, I feel, is what really helped me along this journey. I know that I'm doing all this because I want to share as I learn. I want to bridge the disconnect in urban food systems, and I hopefully want to change people's food choices. And that kind of allows me to funnel the amount of time, effort I'm putting into it. Sometimes I'm okay with not having calls to actions at all because I'm very clear that this is really just part of me sharing as I learn, and sometimes knowledge for knowledge's sake is sufficient for me. And yeah, so just a word of encouragement. It's never too early to start. It's never too late to start. And yeah, thank you for your time. And yes.
Thank you, Eva. I'm not sure, should we move into Q&A now? Okay, wait, I think, yes, Eva, go ahead.
No, yeah, I was thinking there's a couple already in the chat, but also to anyone in the meeting right now, feel free to just raise your hand or turn on your camera and kind of shout out any questions. But I think there's a couple for the two of you already on the Q&A function, if you guys can see them.
Okay, amazing. So I'm just quickly looking at the questions here. I do see one that was just posted on collaboration with other content creators. And Rachel, since you mentioned that you're looking for other writers, maybe you could take this question on how can we collaborate on meaningful climate projects, particularly with other content creators? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it depends on platform, right? Like I guess you would be able to relate also that on Instagram it's generally easier to have collaborations. So I guess if you're looking for collaborations or you want it to be like a group thing, Instagram might be a better platform than let's say writing long form because so far all the writers that I'm onboarding are from like my personal network. So there are people who I've met in real life events who are like, hey, actually I've always wanted to write, or I'm very interested in food systems. I want to put my thoughts out somewhere. I want to put my research out somewhere. As compared to Instagram, where it's very easy to say like, hey, let's do a collab post. There are a lot of like features now on the app itself that you can use. I guess throwing it back to you when it comes to things like podcasts, or you even mentioned starting climate comments with your friends. Where
Mm.
where did you link up with them? How was the process of like it coming into fruition?
No, yeah, I think it's really the same where it's so much easier when you know already like people working in that space. But increasingly, I also see where Instagram DMs or LinkedIn DMs becomes the default mode where people say, "Hey, I love your work. I've been following you for a long time. This is coming up. Maybe we should work on something together." That has come up a lot, especially in Southeast Asia, where we're also noticing that there are not a lot of us creating content in this region in general. And it makes a lot of sense for us to be working together to then see on this particular issue, how are we both seeing it differently coming from different countries. So the collab function is great, but I also see that when you're working on a project, sometimes doing it with other people also allows you to get over that kind of imposter syndrome where you don't want to press post. You're now forced to because you have to deliver something with this other person that you're accountable to. Yes. And there's one other question here that from someone who says that, I've been meaning to start for a long time. What's the first step and what is your recommendation on how to get started? I could just go a little bit first, yes, but how I started was because there was an open call back home where for a long time we've been trying to get something like ivory banned locally, but there were a lot of policy loopholes, which meant that ivory could still be sold. And I love elephants, so I was just like, there's no way I can't let this slip by. I need people to know about it. And back then I only had like 5 followers, maybe. And I started to draw, okay, this is everything you need to know about this policy consultation that's coming up. Here are 5 things you need to know about what they're recommending we do about ivory. And these are 3 reasons why you need to care about ivory. And then I just posted it online. And for me, that didn't gain a lot of traction, but it was sort of the push that I needed to like post something online because I felt that it was important to me. So for me, if getting started on your own and you've been thinking about it and procrastinating on it for a long time, I totally understand you because that is what I've been doing with a lot of other projects that I want to start. But it's always if you need a reason to get started, it could be as simple as working with a friend on something to get you posting. That is what I would recommend. Rachel, what about you?
No, yeah, while you were talking, I scrolled back to like my first ever post on Instagram, and I remember how much like stress there was to like put it out. So for I guess context, I was never on Instagram, so I don't have like a private page. Whereas I guess if you already had a private page, I do have friends in the climate space who kind of use that as something that they advocate on as well. So within like their immediate friends and family also, which I think can be very powerful because it's very personal, right? They are receiving this piece of info from someone that they know and they are close to. But yeah, I didn't have an Instagram page at all. I set one up. I was like, oh, I want to share this really cool book. And it was The Third Plate by Dan Barber. And so I was like, this is so cool. More people should know about it. How is it that I've never read this stuff before? And so I kind of made a cooking post. And then in that cooking post, there was like a post of the food as well as like screenshots from the ebook that I was reading at that point of time. And there was another one on like crabs where I was reading this local writer's piece in there's something Anthropocene, eating chili crab in the Anthropocene. Yes, yes, where she talks about like crabs and how they're very dehumanized and how it kind of maps over almost to the way that we treat land and ecosystems today. And then I remember going out and saying like, I want to get a crab. I'm gonna get a crab. I'm gonna cook the crab. I'm gonna post it on Instagram. I'm gonna use it as a way to talk about it. And I think since then, that was 2021. The way that I create content has evolved a lot, and it's a lot more. It's less polished, less curated, but better put together in the sense where that was just photos of food plus really long captions. And I think everything evolves after you take the first step, right?
Mm.
Because after I had a lot of those posts, I started thinking about like, hey, I should do videos too. And then at some point the video captions got too long. I was like, I need to start a blog. Someone needs to like put all this in like on a platform that's actually readable. And then from there, people have someone recently texted me saying you should start a Telegram channel because I like to receive like reading recommendations from Telegram. So that's the next thing that might happen. So I guess social media is very easy to get on. Just go and then don't have too much inertia. Don't think about having to create good content. Just create content first and share whatever you know you learn. And eventually I guess you'll get more comfortable.
Mm. No, I love that, Rachel, because it's very similar where like I started on Instagram and then I had friends saying, oh, I'm going off Instagram because I'm trying to limit my social media use. Can you create a Telegram channel? Which then evolved to reading long form on Telegram is difficult. Can you create a newsletter? Which I then started. And suddenly you have like a gazillion things to create content on, which becomes super overwhelming. But like you say, you start somewhere and then you end up doing a bunch of different things, which eventually you might feel like, okay, maybe I need to stop doing this here, stop doing this there. And TikTok only came up for me like in the recent years. It never existed before. And all of a sudden, you need to learn how to create short form video content. So that actually brings me to the next question, which someone had in the chat here, which is, there's Instagram, Telegram, LinkedIn, WhatsApp channels, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. All of it are getting good response. Which one is currently getting good response for creating climate related content? Wow, that's a
Y-
lot of channels.
Yes. Do you want to take this one first? Because I think someone also asked earlier on like whether there are tips to increase visibility. And I guess having done this for very long and having grown your following quite significantly, were there tips, were there strategies that you use?
Mm. I would say that I think in the early days before Instagram had Reels, it was tricky to have visibility because of the way the algorithm worked. And the way that that was done, I feel that if you're too focused on following, you are going to be constantly obsessed with trends. What is viral at the moment? How do you create something that is viral? But the thing about climate content is that it's not always viral material. Like, okay, what if today I want to talk about some obscure ant that is of significant relevance? It's very hard to be like, okay, what TikTok song or what Reels dance move I can do to make that interesting, right? It takes a special skill for someone to be able to create viral content, which I'm like, wow, kudos to these people because I struggle with that. So that is difficult, but I think for a period of time, I remember that during the wildfires or during very important things that people were taking note of, like the IPCC reports, or even things like fundraisers, those are key moments where everyone is extremely online. And I always think about if I were reading this, what exactly do I want to share? Do I want to share a quote from what I've learned from this post, or do I want to share an interesting cover image, or a call to action, or a statement? And I tend to create my content in that way where if a quote is what you want, it's on the last page. If a call to action is what you want, it's on the second last page. But if you like a powerful visual in the front, that's the very first page. So then I create it in that with that mindset so that more people share it, which increases visibility. That's for Instagram. I would say that everywhere else is different. Twitter especially is better if you're creating like threads of a hot take that you might have or a very technical subject because a lot of academics use it to explain science and that gets a lot of traction. And for me, LinkedIn gaining visibility over there is also about what specific insight do you have on a particular topic can that you can share where someone might read it and go, I have never thought about it that way. That kind of content often does very well. So it just requires you to play around a little bit because sometimes I will create content and then I'll create like 100 posts and then suddenly one goes extremely viral and I'm like, I don't know why. Yeah, I don't know how that got so much attention, but it gives you enough data to know like, okay, my audience sort of likes this, and that's where I go towards. How about for writing, Rachel?
No, yeah, I was gonna say that like I don't think I follow trends very much, purely because I'm very clear that the reason why I'm doing a lot of the comms that I'm doing is because these are issues that are not being talked about. Nobody's talking about Southeast Asia. Nobody's talking about certain issues within food. Whether it talks about like what kinds of vegetables if you're not looking at meats, things like that. And I feel like very niche, like maybe books cover them or people I've spoken to is like their PhD thesis. And I'm like, okay, now it has to like get out into the world, right? And because of that, there isn't it's almost like you have to sacrifice the virality of it because virality often comes from like this being a very hot topic that's trending and you hop in on it, you do a good job of communicating it. But
Mm.
I'm very much on like nobody's talking about this, I want to talk about this kind of angle. And so for that reason, I guess there hasn't been as much growth as I guess there would have been if I were optimizing everything. So even when it comes to like the blog, I think I'm very clear that it's really just a platform for people to get more information, more in-depth info if they're already kind of interested in it and they know me from Instagram. And that means that when I write, I focus on creating things that are relevant, things that are very research backed, and not so much on things that optimize search and search engines. So if you grow like how to grow a publication, how to grow like an online magazine, everyone's like optimize your SEO, search engine
Mm.
optimization, use certain keywords. I don't like that. I find it very disruptive to my writing. I'm like,
It forces you to cut
what's it
things out
better?
also.
Correct. And it's like, oh, they're like, oh, you haven't mentioned this word enough. Then I'm like, yeah, but this word is not the whole picture. And I would rather write in a way that I think is good writing and have that spread organically. So a lot of the growth has been organic. And because of that, I also have the confidence that whoever follows me are like real life people because I've met them at events. People have been like, oh, you're the one who writes about food, that kind of thing. And so I guess it depends on where your focus in, right? Is whether it's really on like the numbers and the quantity, which is all right because that gives you reach, right? Or whether it's really on like I just want people to be able to find information if they have an interest in it, which is where I'm coming from. Yeah.
Yeah, which also leads to this question where how do you firstly I mean there's a question this two together, maintain consistency, also maybe not get burnt out. But the other thing that I'm curious to also ask you is have you thought about monetizing written content, especially with now subscription services becoming a more hotter way of making money from written content?
So I have gotten that question before because it's relatively easier to monetize writing than it is to like have an Instagram page and then try to make money off that. Um, I probably won't in the near future because again, like going back to the purpose of it, right? I'm very clear that I want to do it because there isn't information available. So then it feels a bit weird to me to paywall things. But I think
Mm,
increasingly one of the other perspective that I'm taking on is also that there is a limit to the number of writers you can bring on or the almost like the demographic or the profile of writers you can bring on if you're not paying them. What do I mean? There was an independent local magazine called Mina that talked about how they have to pay their writers a livable wage because if not, that exempts writers who are not able to kind of like adjust their work schedule or not able to take time off to write a good proper piece. And so they're like, if you want quality and you want all sorts of demographics, people who can or cannot afford to like do this as a side hustle, you need to be paying them well. And for that reason, I guess eventually, I think if we grow to a large enough size and we're really trying to bring on like a very wide range of like perspectives, then I have to start thinking about how to pay writers. And part of that will be like how to get readers to pay their writers. Yeah. But I guess in terms of consistency, I'm very inconsistent. I'm not great at this. And like I'm also I don't see this as a full-time thing. I think if I start thinking about consistency, it makes me never want to post ever again because I get so stressed out about like how many times have I posted this week. And honestly, I think that's okay. Like circling back to the question on like how to get started, just get started. When I started, it was like one post, 3 months of silence, one post kind of thing. Eventually, things figure themselves out. If you enjoy it, you will end up doing it in the long term. If you don't post as consistently because you have nothing to say or just because you're tired or whatever at that moment, it will also work out. And if you kind of don't find yourself enjoying posting, then is there really a point to forcing consistency for the sake of it if it's not really something I enjoy? Yeah. But I guess,
yeah.
yeah, Tyrion, on burnt out, on
No,
monetizing your content because I'm sure it's monetizable.
yes. It's very interesting you say that because I feel that social media favors consistency, which is just not a very sustainable mode of creating content as creators. And I remember consistency as like when I started my newsletter, it was also a way for me to protect my own audience and content because I remember there was a period of time where my Instagram account got hacked and I was just like, oh my goodness, if this goes down, I'm in deep trouble. And I needed to find a way to diversify what I was doing so that I wouldn't lose out on a stream of income or an audience just because one company decides to shut down. And I think that's why people diversify into different audiences because you can't rely on one thing that is so out of your control. And also when the algorithm is not even in your control. So when it comes to burnout, I have definitely burnt out very many times in this process because social media also creates an environment where you feel like you have to be present and online all the time to stay relevant. And those of us in the impact space will feel like, oh my gosh, if I don't post this about this wildfire today, will people know about it? This is so important. You constantly feel like you have to keep up. And there's so many things. There are heat waves after heat waves, records after records being broken. You need to force yourself to take that break. If not, your body will do that for you. And I've faced too many of that to realize like, okay, I can't do this for long enough. How important is content creation for me? Luckily, I think in the last 2 years, I've been able to monetize a lot of my content. Interestingly, for my newsletter, writing was never something that I made paid, but I've had a few instances where people say, "Hey, I would like to pay for this. Can I send you?" Last they used to have this thing called Ko-fi, where people can send you money to buy you coffee. And I'll have random subscribers send $30 or $5 to be like, thank you for your work. We appreciate it. And that is so much validation because I think for myself, someone who doesn't write, and Rachel writes beautifully, I'm like, oh no, will anyone pay for my writing? So to have someone say that is also sort of an indication for you to think about how do you monetize it. For artists, a lot of my friends make merchandise. They sell their art, they sell stickers, they sell pins, which has been a big point of contention for me because I don't want to be creating things just because. So that's really hard. But I've also evolved my partnership models where I will work with corporate partners to create content, but I'm very strict to say, hey, for the first 9 pages of this Instagram post, it needs to be as brand agnostic as possible, meaning if anyone can repost this content and not feel like this is sponsored by XXX and leave the sponsored advertisement at the back. And I've been very lucky to find partners who are like, yeah, we're okay with that as long as you post about it. So finding that kind of and sometimes you just need one or two people to say, yes, we are willing to try with you to open up all the doors. But from creating content, sometimes you also have to create a new style or a new product or a new way of selling your work before someone goes, I'm very interested. This looks cool. Can I somehow be a part of it? So I don't know. Maybe it's also try and error for everybody.
Oh yeah, I think that was really interesting. I don't know if we have time for like one last question, but I did see one very interesting one that maybe you would have more to share about. Um, Someone asked about what's relatively effective in terms of strategies to attract more stakeholders' attention on social media. And I guess tailoring that a bit to your journey because I understand a bit about it. You engage a lot with like privates, with public, with governments and things like that. Is social media what you use to kind of reach out to them and like, oh, nudge them into action? Is it something else? How do you use social media in that context?
Ooh, this is so interesting because it's also like what you said, right? Like a lot of your collaborators are friends or people that you meet at events. And in this case, and I'll leave you to delve into that. But for me, I think to attract a stakeholder's attention on social media, LinkedIn, because professionally, that's just been the best way for me to talk to them about a topic. Because usually, if once you're connected, you are in their feed, you're constantly posting things. Another thing about actually burnout is that for LinkedIn, especially, I post my content. I sit down every Monday for half an hour and I write 2 to 3 posts and I schedule them for the week or for the next week so that I don't have to think about it every single day. And then I get it out of my way and it just posts itself. And I find that a very good way for anyone overcoming imposter syndrome on LinkedIn because now you don't have to think about pressing that button. You press it once, it just comes out. And that has been a very good way to educate them, especially after an event where recently I've met a lot of creatives who are not in the sustainability scene, but we end up connecting. And I post a lot on the environment, which then leads them to say, okay, maybe I want to pursue this instead, or these customers, or a new job. So I think that works very well. Live stream with limited time access, sometimes yes, but I also realized that there's so many live streams out there that people just don't have time to listen or to think about it. But I see Instagram and LinkedIn as one of the best ways because these are the two platforms that allow you to be very hyper present such that you become friends with them for a long time post event. What about you, Rachel?
No, yeah, I think like what you said about connecting with people at events and kind of staying in touch. Instagram has been great for me because it's less personal. Like I'm not a big fan of giving out my contact info. And there are
Mm.
also other things that you can kind of chat about on Instagram because you're posting stories, you're posting posts, people are responding, and from there, I guess, is where my friends in the space have kind of come about. And then when there's another climate event, you're like, hey, you want to go together because you kind of kept in touch. And I guess if I'm understanding the question correctly, there is some element of like, if there's a real life event, how do you keep conversation and buzz going on after the event? And I guess like follow up posts are always great. During the event, always let people know where they can find you, where they can find the organization. And for that reason, I think it's important if you're an organization that's running workshops and things like that to have a social media presence so that the next time you're setting something up, the next time you're organizing something, you have a way to let people know and people have a way to keep in touch with you. And yeah, so I guess that's really all I have to add.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love that. Yes. And I know we have 3 more minutes, so we could take one last one. And I think I would love to also pose this to Rachel, where how do you think about maintaining and improving visibility on social media, especially when there might be many up and rising creators within like a subject area?
I definitely don't, not enough. Um, I think for me, I'm not so like results oriented, and because of that, I find it very difficult to like sit down and read about like search engine optimization, read about like posting schedules and optimize times. Um, I'm learning to go for the low hanging fruit first, things like scheduling posts for when it's like peak hour and things like that, which is something that I recently started doing. Because before that, I was very much like, oh, I'll just post whenever I want to post. But I'm like, it doesn't hurt me to like take that half a step extra. And so I've been trying to be more intentional about these things. I guess I'm fortunate that I feel like, especially in Singapore, and with how like strongly contextualized the stuff I post about is, there isn't a lot of like content creators who are kind of up and coming and talking about the exact same things. And if there were, I think I might stop because I'm like, oh, someone else is doing good work, someone else is talking about it. That means I can kind of like scale back. But the thing that really keeps me going is the fact that like, oh no, this is not mainstream yet, and this should be it, must be, and that's why I do it. But I guess if someone comes up and it's like the mainstream thing where it's to the extent where I feel threatened almost as a content creator, it's time for me to like retire and like move on to other things in my life for me. Yeah. But what about you? Any thoughts on like staying relevant?
No, that's so funny because I feel that that's the best way to be creating content because you're not stressed out with numbers or visibility. And really, I think that everyone has their own unique way of creating content. And right now, professionally, I've also helped a lot of my bosses, personalities that I'm working with in the climate space use social media. And a lot of what they say is, they're worried that they don't have enough followers, don't have enough likes on certain things. But my advice to them is always don't care about any of that because that might naturally come depending on what is mainstream exactly at the moment, what is the hot topic at the moment. But if you enjoy doing it and you stay for the long haul, in maybe 3 years, that could be your moment. Like that could be the moment where suddenly a scientist is extremely popular, or you might have one reel that goes viral and then everybody finds you. So I would say that to maintain visibility is just to love creating so much that you want to stay on the platform for a long time. And every creator has their own unique point of view. I think you start to be threatened or you start to lose out when you try to copy somebody else or when you try to emulate someone else. Because after a while, you'll realize that you're, unfortunately then become replaceable because that's not what we are all are. We are all unique with our particular point of view on a certain thing. We could read the same book and have a different opinion on social media. And I remember someone telling me like, oh, you are just any typical environmentalist, you have the same view. And I'm like, no, everyone has a different view. Every creator has a different view. You can be an environmentalist caring about a topic like climate change. And if you're based in Singapore versus Thailand versus California versus Mexico, you will all have different views and different ways of talking about that same topic. So don't worry about who's out there. I think you can just focus on what do you love doing and capture that on social media as much as possible. And yes, I think that's about all the time we have. So I'm passing this. Thanks, Rachel, for joining me on this. And thank you to the Youth4Capacity team. Eva, I'll pass this back to you.
I'm throwing the thank you back to the two of you. Really, thank you so much, even Lexi, for sharing all your tips, but mostly your journeys into climate content creation. And I hope at least I've been taking a bunch of notes on the side for the session from all the tips, and I hope this has motivated everyone in the call as well to start, crafting their own climate content. And it's great to hear as well in the chat that some of you already are in that process. And again, this session has really meant a lot to me because I've been a follower of the Weird and the Wild for a really long time now. And it's really creators like you that drew me to essentially pursue a career in climate change in the first place and understand the complexity of climate change, but also connect to people and their stories. So really props to you and to everyone as well today in the call that's pursuing content creation or, will start pursuing it from now. So really thanks so much. Please do check out Qiyun and Rachel's work, and we'll put their socials as well over in the meeting chat. But really, thanks so much for the two of you again and for everyone that joined today. Thank you.
Thank
Take care,
you.
everyone.